Well, if you can't tell by my background, the countdown's on. Welcome into Game Day Scoreboard. Kiana Martin here with you as we begin counting down to Sunday's big game out in New Orleans, but also across the association. Now less than 2 days away from the trade deadline with already some blockbuster moves around the NBA. We dive into some best bets for Tuesday night as the second half of the season starts to take shape, but we got to start tonight's conversation with the most important position on the field and the most important game of the week. Well, it was 7 years to the date. A once backup quarterback called for one of the most iconic plays in Super Bowl history. Nick Foles asked then head coach Doug Peterson, "You want Philly, Philly?" And that bold call, affectionately known as the Philly Special, helped deliver the Eagles their first ever Lombardi trophy in a 41-33 victory over Tom Brady's Patriots. Now 7 years later, they'll try to create more magic in Super Bowl 59. This time around, this 2024-2025 Eagles team has their own brand of trickery that has helped in their quarterback's favor. With 3 rushing touchdowns in their NFC Championship win over the Commanders, Jalen Hurts now has more rushing touchdowns in the postseason than any quarterback in NFL history, surpassing 49ers Hall of Fame QB Steve Young's record of 8. Here's Eagles head coach Nick Sirianni on more on what he expects out of his offense this time around.
If you embrace adversity, it can shape you to who you are, and obviously that's been the case through Jalen and his career. But it is about embracing adversity. This game's not easy, and this game has its ups and downs, and that's how a football game. Seasons have ups and downs. From year to year has ups and downs. Well, that's how a football game goes, right? And nobody in the NFL, I've said this a bunch, nobody in the NFL pitches a perfect game. That doesn't exist in the NFL. You're going to have bad plays, you're going to have good plays, and it's about being able to focus your mindset on the next one. And so, like I said again, this team's embraced adversity. I don't think, you never know, but the things, even going back to the 2023 season, which we haven't talked a lot about since the beginning of the year, we're grateful for that. We're thankful for that. As bad as it sucked at the time, I know I'm grateful for that. I speak for myself. I'm grateful for that because it shaped us into who we are now, and a big reason why we're back here sitting at this moment again. And so, embracing adversity is huge, and for your development as a person, as a player, as a coach.
Embracing adversity. Well, there's a couple of areas where Jalen Hurts hasn't really seen too much adversity. A couple hurts in the offense's efficiency in the red zone, along with his passing stats. The quarterback hasn't thrown an interception in the playoffs since 2021. 7 touchdowns to 0 interceptions entering Sunday's game this season. But all but one quarterback with 6 tutties or more and no picks went on to win the Super Bowl that year. The only one that didn't, well, that was Matt Ryan back in 2016, 28-3. We'll just leave that one right there. So what more does Hurts need to do to win his second title? Well, for that answer, we bring in CBS Sports NFL analysts Will Brinson and Emery Hunt. There's plenty on the line for both franchises, but specifically, what do they need to do to hoist that Lombardi in New Orleans? So, Will, beginning with Hurts, what's his keys to a victory Sunday night?
Well, Kiana, I think he's going to have to pass the ball effectively. And that sounds simple. He can do it. But I think the Chiefs are going to do a good job being able to slow down the run game to a degree. As much as you can slow down Saquon Barkley and then, of course, the tush push. They did it against Josh Allen and the Bills. They really flustered Allen in terms of those short yardage runs. I think they're going to be able to do it here. I think they're going to force Jalen. I think Jalen Hurts is going to come out. I think Sirianni designed a game plan to come out and pass early on to open up the run game. I wouldn't be surprised by that at all. So I think Hurts has got to be effective early in the pass game and downfield in the pass game in order to open up that run game, force Kansas City to sort of back up on defense, and then really you can do whatever you want at that point, and you can grind the clock, keep the ball out of Patrick Mahomes' hands, and try to bring another Lombardi back to Philly.
I truly believe it's work in the middle of the field. I think this is a matchup where the Philadelphia Eagles have an advantage against that Chiefs defense in terms of the safety play. We saw the safety play be an issue for Kansas City against Buffalo, and the Bills sort of started to exploit it until they got in their own heads and forgot the run game with James Cook. We know Philly won't do that. We know Jalen Hurts will love to take 1,000 swings at bat. It's death by 1,000 cuts in terms of how they operate offense. He's efficient in the passing game, and this efficiency is going to help open up the run game, like Will talked about perfectly, because at the end of the day, it's about putting those safeties in the bind. You have to worry about Goddard. You have to worry about the short hook routes over the Carroll Flat area. I think that's where they're going to exploit. Next thing you know, they creep up, big shot deep down the field. We saw Jalen Hurts have success the first time these two teams met up in the Super Bowl 2 years ago, and I think he could have the same type of success throwing a football in this one.
You guys saying Jalen Hurts needs to open up that passing attack against Kansas City safeties. But, Emery, we know huge addition for Hurts this offseason has been Saquon Barkley, and we're also aware of the threat that both of them bring. But taking them completely out of the equation, I want to just look at this Philly offense as a whole. What offensive player not named Hurts, not named Barkley, needs to step up and have a big game for Philly?
I'm going to start right in the middle, Cam Jurgens. And here's the thing. He was kind of banged up going into the NFC Championship game. That was a big story. He didn't start. A back issue flared up. And then the replacement got hurt. And then he had to come back in the ball game and still play pretty well. He says he's good to go for the Super Bowl. We'll see, because we know what Kansas City will do is see how healthy he is for the Super Bowl. They'll throw different games, stunts, and twists up front, try to see how healthy he is. But we know, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, big tackle propaganda has led people to believe that it's all about the left and right tackle. But really, offensive success is predicated on guard, center, guard play. And the Eagles have some excellent guards with Dickerson and Mekhi Becton alongside Cam Jurgens at center. So Jurgens, to me, is going to be the biggest key in this ballgame for the offense of Philadelphia.
Yeah, look, the offensive line is everything for Philly, right? But I'm going to say Dallas Goedert. And I think, when you say he needs to step up, what we're talking about is let's just have a big game, right? Because that would imply that Dallas Goedert hasn't been stepping up. He's been awesome since he came back from injury for the Eagles. 7 catches, 85 yards against Washington, 4 catches, 56 yards against the Rams, had a touchdown and close to 50 yards against the Packers. So this is a guy that's been dynamic in the postseason. His physical and the yards after the catch, just finding ways to really complement what the Eagles have on the outside at wide receiver and A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, giving Jalen Hurts another easy button. And when you look at what the Eagles have done, when the big group of star receivers, Barkley, Hurts, are all out there, they've just been pretty unstoppable on offense. And I think Goddard plays a big part in that.
Absolutely. But meanwhile, for the Chiefs, no stranger to the pageantry and hoopla surrounding the Super Bowl. So minimizing distractions in all forms has been a focal point for Andy Reid over the last week. That also includes the noise surrounding that potential, phrase, three-peat. But here's what Reid had to say about the distractions.
And all this other stuff doesn't necessarily matter. It matters to people in the entertainment part of the business, but without the guys focusing on the game, or the coaches, or myself in that same boat there, that you lose track of what this thing's all about. You can get really caught up in all this, and you can't get too far from what's real, and that's playing the game.
Yeah, Andy Reid, he ain't new to this. He's true to this. Patrick Mahomes ain't new to this, also true to this. But we've seen that Mahomes magic continue to show up just on every stage throughout his career. But, well, what offensive player not named Patrick Mahomes needs to have a day on Sunday?
I mean, you can list a lot of them, Kiana. I'm going to go a little bit off board here. I'll channel my inner Mike McClure from our show on Thursday on the network and say DeAndre Hopkins. How about Nuke Hopkins, who is like maybe a Hall of Famer? I mean, a lot of people would say he was definitely going to be in. I think it's probably borderline. But a guy who, they trade for. He's had some moments in Kansas City, but really his snap count has dwindled throughout the playoffs, and he just hasn't been a factor. This is a guy that talked openly about on Monday night about wanting to chase a ring, and that's fine. I mean, you go to Kansas City, that's where you want to do it. I think they need to win on the outside to open things up for Mahomes in that playbook, and the running game in particular, because running against Philly is really hard. And Hopkins, I think, could be a sneaky candidate to have a nice game after sort of seeing him phased out of that offense for Kansas City the last few weeks.
It's so funny, Will, because I'm right there with you. It's like every time they bring up Kansas City's offense, you talk about Mahomes and you talk about Travis Kelce and you bring up Taylor Swift and you talk about, Kareem Hunt and research. You'd be like, Man, I know that ain't DeAndre Hopkins out there chilling. Like, that's the guy that you have to get involved. Like, that's the one. That's the big X factor. Because for me, Worthy speed is going to be a problem for Philadelphia because of obvious speed. Hollywood Brown and his ability to stretch the defense and lift the umbrella off the coverage is one thing. But DeAndre Hopkins, to your point, is a future Hall of Famer, or at least on a trek toward that, and he wants to be a factor in why this team wins the 3rd Super Bowl in a row. But in order for that to happen, you have to target him. He has to get open. I'm pretty sure he's going to be lined up on Darius Slay. That's a matchup between 2 wily vets. So Hopkins having a big game could easily help Kansas City get their 3rd Lombardi.
A guy that he was very vocal about the fact that he didn't think he was ever going to be able to play on this stage. Well, now with an opportunity to do some damage, like you guys are mentioning, a guy who could really step up in the Super Bowl. But look, guys, whether you're betting on Mahomes or maybe you're rolling with the underdog, you got some interesting long shot bets to maybe sprinkle a little something on. Give me your long shots I can maybe keep in my back pocket heading into Sunday.
All right, I'll rip through this real quick. Jalen Hurts, 300 pass yards. He did it last time against the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. We talked about him passing. Makes a ton of sense. Xavier Worthy, 50 first-quarter receiving yards. All you need is one play. Xavier Worthy also to be the first guy to 20 rushing yards. They go the little jet sweep. You never know what happens. I like a Noah Gray first touchdown scorer. Somebody to kick a walk-off field goal. Why not? That seems fun. And I'm not going to read them all, but I'll say this one too. Chiefs money line. Saquon Barkley anytime touchdown, and Sam Burns to win the Waste Management Phoenix Open on CBS, coupled without Scotty Scheffler. So Scotty can win. Sam Burns just has to be second. Chiefs win. Saquon Barkley anytime touchdown. You're looking at like 80-1 payout, and I'm dancing in the streets if that happens.
Listen, I will say this. I love that list he put together, Will, because one thing we know, everyone always thinks the game is rigged or is a script that we all get in the media. But I love the one where any team could have a walk-off field goal to win this ball game, because think about both kickers. Both haven't had their best seasons. So what a great way to cap off a magical NFL season, whether it's Philadelphia winning their 2nd Super Bowl, with Jalen Hurts getting revenge, or Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs winning the 3rd straight NFL record Super Bowl in a row, with a kicker walking off into the sunset as the hero, getting carried off. I could see that happening for either side, so I'm going with that at plus 1,200.
I like just all the plus value. These are some really, really fun long shots, but hey, let's be honest. Anything can happen. We've seen plenty of action. You can catch that top 10 list on CBSSports.com from Will Brinson. And fellas, I'm also just going to say something that could be fun. I like the Gatorade color, the coin flip, all of those little fun ones too. You can have plenty of fun. Make sure you guys check out that list on CBSSports.com. Emery, Will, it's been a blast. Thanks, fellas. And the coverage doesn't stop here. We've got boots on the ground in New Orleans all week long. Our analysts are on the scene at Super Bowl 59, breaking down the top storylines, the latest news and analysis, best bets. They got it all. Keep it locked right here. CBS Sports HQ all week long.
Here's a look at how Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes showed out 2 years ago in the big game. Hurts outdid Mahomes when it came to passing yards, rushing yards, and rushing TDs. But Mahomes got the better of him in 3 passing TDs. And, of course, the victory, which is what they want the most. Time now to welcome in Sportsline analyst Todd Furman and Emery Hunt for some Super Bowl 59 QB prop bets. And first one, Patrick Mahomes' total is set for 250.5 passing yards. Based on what we've seen this entire season, Todd, we taking the over or the under here?
I'm going to go under with Mahomes and his passing yardage at 250.5, Chris. You showed the graphic there in terms of what Mahomes did against an Eagles defense a couple of years ago in the Super Bowl that's going to look significantly different this coming Sunday. And while Mahomes has gone over this number in 3 out of 4 Super Bowls, look, this is a Kansas City offense that's methodical. They're not a big play group. They're not going to hit the explosives against this Eagles defense. And if you dig into some of the underlying numbers, Mahomes has been elite when he gets the ball out of his hands in under 2.5 seconds. The problem being, if he's forced to survey the field or try and extend plays, those numbers have kind of fallen off a cliff. And for the Chiefs, they're going to run into an Eagles defense that's one of the best in the league defending short passing. I think Mahomes is going to complete a high volume of passes. I'm just not sure the yardage is going to be there. I'll take him under 250.5 against this Vic Fangio defensive front.
I'm going to go over, Todd. I do like what you're saying about how he's going to rack up completions. I just don't see any way for them to have success running the football against this Philadelphia defensive interior. So for me, that is going to have to be the passing game. And I do think that that's going to be a way for them to have success offensively. We saw Washington do a great job with that, with a short, quick passing game, slowly work themselves down the field. Now, granted, you have a more explosive runner in Jaden Daniels, but you have a guy in Mahomes that's no slouch in terms of scrambling and extending the play. I can see him getting over this number against this Eagles defense.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he does, but same with speaking to Todd's point, it also wouldn't surprise me if he gets under that total, just based on the way things have gone for this season. Now, Jalen Hurts, there's all this talk about, he doesn't pass enough. His passing yards stats don't look that great, but his prop bet for passing yards, 211.5. Are you taking the under here, Emery?
I'm going over. Again, we saw him have success in the Super Bowl last time against Kansas City. Granted, different players, different scheme in terms of like what they did with those guys that they had on that team. But with this team, I do like Hurts going over that number. We've seen him be efficient. We've seen him be effective. And I like the matchup here between their receiving core, including the tight ends and also the backs, against the safeties of Kansas City. That's the matchup they can exploit. I like Hurts to go over this number.
And Emery, I'm actually right there with you with Jalen Hurts. Look, this is a Philadelphia offense that's not predicated on running a West Coast scheme. They're going to ask Jalen Hurts to complete a high volume of passes and move the ball down the field that way. But I do think the explosive is going to be a big part of what the Eagles want to do in the passing game, most notably because how sensitive Kansas City's defense has been against play action all season long. And you look at Jalen Hurts, who I'll use the word relegated, but it probably doesn't do enough justice for his performance against the Commanders. And what he did in that game, targeting his two alphas in the room and A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. 10 of 12 in that game for 141 yards. A.J. Brown is going to be interesting in this spot, but I think Smith can operate from the slot and have a tremendous amount of success where Kansas City has been their most vulnerable. I'll look for Jalen Hurts to put together a big passing day, although I'm not quite sure he'll flirt with the 300 yards passing we saw a couple Super Bowls ago when the game was played in Phoenix.
Yeah, but I definitely think he's going to get 215 or plus. Now, when it comes to Patrick Mahomes' passing completions, the number is set at 23.5. We going with the over here, Todd?
Yeah, I am going to go over, Chris. I think from a yards per attempt standpoint, you look at Mahomes and what he's done this season. I mean, the intended air yards just haven't been there, but the completions have. Now, when you dig into what he's done over each of the last two playoff games against the Houston Texans and against the Bills in the AFC title game, didn't get to 20 completions in either of those games. But I think in this particular spot, the Eagles are going to force the Chiefs to play a little bit left-handed. So what does that mean for Mahomes? Getting the ball out of his hands quickly, throwing it to receivers that we may not necessarily forecast to have big days, but if the Chiefs are going to have success, to Emery's point, it's not going to be because their ground game goes nuclear. It's because Mahomes is taking this thing over. I'll take him over the depressed price at 23.5 in completions.
Yeah, the magic number for me, Todd, is probably 25. So you're skating along that line here with 2 incompletions, but I like him to go over the number as well. I feel like when you look at Kansas City and how they can rack up these completions, and Andy Reid and how he dials up those screen passes, does a great job in getting those called at the right time. That could be a supplement of their run game. So going over 23.5 completions, to me, feels like an easy bet.
Yeah, especially when you look at how they've had issues with their offensive line. So getting the ball out quickly definitely will aid to him getting more completions. Now, Jalen Hurts, his passing completion number set at 18.5. How do you want to pick this one, Emery?
This is extremely disrespectful, and in February, no less. You know what I'm saying? So I will go over this number because I like him to get at least 20 to 23 completions in an efficient manner. I could see him going 23 to 28. Because he is efficient with his approach. He doesn't put the ball in harm's way, or he hasn't, at least in the playoffs. He's been very good with the football, and he knows what happened last year when he put the ball on the ground. That changed the whole tide of the game. I expect him to protect the football and not only get these completions up, but definitely cross this number. That's very disrespectful at 18.5.
And Emery, I'm going to buy into the disrespect card and go the other way, taking Jalen Hurts under 18.5 completions. Now, I do like him under attempts a little bit more than completions. Philadelphia's offense, not necessarily designed to connect on some of those high percentage passing plays underneath. But Emery brings up an excellent point, talking about how Jalen Hurts has done such a great job protecting the football. But that's largely because they don't allow Jalen Hurts to throw into some of those congested windows. So if they're going to be working off of play action, I think Philadelphia is going to try and hunt the deep ball. They're going to try and get their playmakers involved down the field. But I just don't see a lot of those high volume completions coming into that 5 to 10 yard range. So while I like him to go over the passing yardage total, I'm going to take him under 18.5. But again, not a ton of wiggle room. I have him forecasted right around 17 here.
All right, got you. Maybe Saquon's going to have a huge day. It's time for Best Bet. And our first one, what is Patrick Mahomes' best bet, Todd?
You know, Chris, I came real close to trying to target Patrick Mahomes and his legs in this particular matchup. Problem being is the over-under for rushing attempts got out to 6.5, and it started to come back at 5.5, so a little bit of a no-fly zone. I'll go right back to the market that we started the segment with, mentioning Mahomes and what can be expected of the passing game. Look, for Patrick Mahomes to go over 250.5, quite frankly, I think the Chiefs have to play from a negative game state from start to finish. I think they'll be methodical moving the ball, but I just don't think those chunk yardage plays will be there. This is a Philadelphia secondary that's completely remade from the last time these teams played in the Super Bowl. Yes, there are a couple familiar faces out there, but Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell have really given this group an identity. I don't think Mahomes has a big, highly prolific passing game. I'll take him under 250.5.
There are times where I feel like we're living in a simulation because we've seen this story before time and time again, especially with Patrick Mahomes in this Super Bowl. You know, this is his fourth one. So for me, I like him to throw a fourth quarter touchdown pass, whether they're down and needing to come back and tie the game or take the lead, or whether they're trying to play catch up and try to keep the Eagles away because the Eagles are trying to score and are threatening. I can see him throwing a fourth quarter touchdown at plus 130. To me, that is a fantastic odd right there to take Mahomes doing what Mahomes does.
It would be shocking if we didn't get a Mahomes fourth quarter TD. Like, if that happens, I don't know what would be happening in this world for that to happen. Now, on the other side, gentlemen, Jalen Hurts, what about his best bet, Emery?
Again, tying into the disrespect, him going over 1.5 touchdown passes at plus weird number 176. But I'll take it anyway because I like his throwing the football to two number ones in Devonta Smith and also A.J. Brown. Dallas Goedert is out there. We know Saquon Barkley is always one touch away from making a house call, whether that's with a run or a pass. So I can see him going over this number. I can expect him to go over this number because, again, we know what he did in the last Super Bowl and how tough that has to weigh on him coming into this ballgame of how they could have won that game last time. I expect him to have his best game of the season and the biggest game of the season, so I like him to go over 1.5 touchdown passes.
And Emery, I'm going to go a slightly different way with Jalen Hurts, and I'm going to focus on his legs that have been a key component of everything that Philadelphia wants to do in short yardage and in goal-to-go situations. I'm actually going to bet him for an anytime touchdown at minus $1.15. I know this is a market that I typically shy away from, as I feel like a lot of the higher profile players are always overvalued. But you look at what Jalen Hurts has done in his last 70 games. He scored touchdowns in 40 of them, and really believe if they get into those short yardage situations, he's going to be able to vulture a goal line carry or two away. And typically in the Super Bowl, we see the over-under for shortest touchdowns set at 1.5 yards, heavily juiced to the under. I think Hurts becomes the beneficiary, and for me, I actually make this number closer to that minus $1.30 to minus 135 range. So I'm showing significant value with Hurts to find pay dirt with his legs instead of his arm in this particular instance. Jalen Hurts, anytime touchdown, my best prop for the pivot for the Philadelphia Eagles.
And for Eagles fans, Hakes, they're hoping that that brotherly shove is going to be used multiple times in the short yardage area. Emery Hunt, Todd Furman, thanks so much for the insight, guys. And so, in case you need a little refresher on those gentlemen's picks, so Todd going under for Mahomes, 250.5 passing yards. Emery likes the over. They have the same perspective when it comes to Hurts passing yards total, both for Mahomes completion percentage or completions. And Emery likes the over for Hurts, 8.5 completions. Best Mahomes bet, Todd going with under 250 passing yards. Fourth quarter TD pass for Emery. And best Hurts bet, Todd loving the anytime TD for Jalen. Emery loves that over 1.5 passing TD set at plus 176.
Welcome
Welcome into HQ Spotlight. I'm Jacqueline D'Agostino alongside Tommy Tran, Danny Cannell. The countdown continues until Super Bowl 59. We're getting festive in the studio. A lot of excitement. Happy Super Bowl week to all of those who celebrate. Danny, are you excited as we're getting closer and closer to the game?
I cannot wait. Caught a little media night last night. It was kind of, get your blood flowing a little bit, gets you excited. The crazy questions. I think the players are ready for this thing to get kicked off.
I was going to say the questions are always insane. It's become like a theme of
especially on that night.
Yeah.
The other media comes, they're non-traditional football ones, so you kind of get questions out of left field. And we're also getting, of course, a rematch 2 times in 3 years with the Eagles and Chiefs. So what we're going to do is we're going to break down the differences of each team from 2 years ago in Glendale, Arizona to now in New Orleans. Let's start with the 2-time champs seeking a three-peat, and that would be the Kansas City Chiefs. They beat the Buffalo Bills at Arrowhead to get to this point, and Kansas City has beaten Buffalo in the playoffs 4 of the last 5 postseasons. Here's Andy Reid on that potential three-peat.
And all this other stuff doesn't necessarily matter. It matters to people in the entertainment part of the business, but without the guys focusing on the game, or the coaches, or myself in that same boat there, that you lose track of what this thing's all about. You can get really caught up in all this, and you can't get too far from what's real, and that's playing the game.
We also got Charles Davis joining us for a nice conversation. Again, we're going to tackle the Eagles in the next block. It's going to be the champs in this block. And Danny, I'm going to give you first word. We're going to go through some position groups. Again, the difference is 2 years ago and now. And if you look at wide receiver, it's really Juju Smith-Schuster, Watson as well. How different is this version of the Chiefs than the one we saw in Glendale 2 years ago?
A totally different class. You mentioned Juju Smith-Schuster goes away for a year, then comes back and tries to run it back again. But I do think this class, with the addition of DeAndre Hopkins, a veteran, combined with a younger guy in Xavier Worthy, it's allowed him to kind of come along at a pace which has been comfortable, struggle a little bit earlier in the season. Then all of a sudden, he's kind of really come into his own later in the season here. But this is all about Patrick Mahomes and the ability for him to adapt. I mean, I don't think people realize the intricacies in any type of system, but specifically what Andy Reid wants to do. There's continuity, there's depth of routes, there's route adjustments that you're going to do versus blitz, versus zone, versus man coverage. Those things take time, which I think is one of the reasons this season has kind of been a little bit slower for this Kansas City offense, as he's gotten used to some of these new receivers. But at this point in the season, it's all go right now. You're not worried about any continuity issues now. This team has played long enough where they are used to each other.
And Danny, you know better than anyone, having played the position, what it takes sometimes to bring guys along to where they understand what you're looking for. And then you, of course, having to understand how they go about doing things in order to get your reads, your tells, your understanding as a play develops. Yeah, I can go here with that because I know he's going to break off inside off of his leverage, et cetera, et cetera. You mentioned the differences, and the differences are a little bit, I don't want to say stark, but it allows this Kansas City offense to operate a little bit differently than they did against Philadelphia the last time, because Xavier Worthy is much more the X factor, because you can use him in so many different ways. Out wide, in the slot, you hand it to him, you screen it to him, you swing it to him, you do different things of that nature. Then you hope that he can get it open space and his speed comes into play. The other thing is, we do know that Travis Kelce is still wide receiver 1. All right, that is Patrick Mahomes' guy. But how about Noah Gray, who was around the last time, but wasn't really part of their offense in throwing the football? A trust factor's been developed there. Patrick Mahomes will throw the football to him. We know he's going to try and get Kelce involved early and take off from there. But they've also shown he can catch 2 passes and they can advance to the Super Bowl. So that's where things might be a little bit different here. The only thing is, Danny, I don't expect the Eagles to have 2 breakdowns in the secondary that leave people wide open on short motion plays.
Charles, let's circle back to Travis Kelce, because even though he still is Patrick Mahomes' guy, the production, not only from 2 years ago, but it's just been slowly decreasing. We talked about ranking the Super Bowl starters yesterday, and Pete Prisco had put Travis Kelce outside of the top 10 in terms of both of these teams. And the production, Charles, from this AFC Championship against Buffalo and the last, 13, 14 playoff appearances, it's vastly different. We know Taylor Swift is different, over the last 2 years, but what else for Travis, even though he is slowly digressing? I mean, does it matter? Because they do still figure it out on offense.
Yeah, it still matters, Jacqueline, but not to the extent that he's not going to be a big part of what they do in terms of game planning. Now, what Philadelphia does with him may change things, but you see the numbers coming down, and the way I see it, Danny, Father Time gets us all, because a lot of that production we saw earlier was yards after the catch. And we're not seeing that to the same extent before with Travis Kelce. Nowadays, he's catching, and that's what you get. Now, against Houston, there were a couple of times he was wide open, he galloped and gained big yardage. Also saw him make a couple of moves against Houston that we hadn't seen as much of this season. If we can get more of that of him in this game, that'll be big for them. But the biggest part of it is, put it to you this way. Remember the Tampa Bay game, Danny, on Monday night? He caught 14 balls for 100 yards. That sounds good. Do it yards per catch. Previously, 14 balls would have been 150 yards for Travis Kelce. That's the difference.
I'm just glad Charles was the one that said Father Time catches up with you, because it catches up with everybody except for Charles Davis, who has not aged a bit since the minute I've known him. But he is 35 years old. He is getting up to you, and playing in the NFL is like aging in dog years. It just adds exponentially to your shelf life. And at that type of age, with the type of wear and tear he's played at, it's still remarkable that he's even able to put up the type of numbers that he does now. I also think there's also an aspect of this where defenses have looked at this offense and they figured out ways. Like when it was Tyreek Hill and he was back there, it was like, all right, let's try not to get beat by the deep ball. Let's keep them all in front of you. Let's force them to be patient. Then when he's gone, as you're figuring out Xavier Worthy's role, as you're figuring out Juju Smith-Schuster's role in this offense, like we're going to let anybody but Travis Kelce beat you. So I think defenses also have started to really focus in, hone in on him. When in his prime, it was a little bit tougher. It didn't matter what you did. You couldn't shut him down, where now I think they're containing him a little bit more. It's a little bit harder. It's a little bit more effort for them to get the ball to Travis Kelce. And Jacqueline, you're the one that mentioned it. I did not. 2 years ago, something occurred, and since then...
It's been a year and a half, so technically that doesn't apply to this exercise. I know the timeline like the back of my hand. So,
That's
you know,
right.
She wasn't there for that Eagles Super Bowl.
I'm just kidding. I think it's more about his age and about the defenses he's facing.
All right, Charles, if we go to you with the offensive line now, with the wide receivers, you were a bit hesitant to say a stark difference between 2 years ago, but the offensive line has no Orlando Brown. They had to move Joe Thuney to tackle. Creed Humphrey, yes, he's there, but how would you describe what we're seeing in the difference in the two Super Bowls here?
You're right, Tommy, because it's not a stark difference with receivers. You're still getting about the same amount of production, and DeAndre Hopkins did not ascend to wide receiver one as possibly they had hoped. But you're exactly right about this offensive line, because what I think about when I talk to the three of you on this one, you remember when Jason Peters got hurt during Philadelphia's Super Bowl run and they had to make a decision about Lane Johnson? Does he stay at right tackle? Do we move him to left? And they decided to make only one move. Leave Lane Johnson, and Halapoulivaati Vaitai played left tackle, and they worked with it. Kansas City has now been, all right, when you think about this year, Kingsley Suamataia been out there. Wanye Morris has been out there. DJ Humphries has been out there at left tackle, and they had to go to Joe Thuney. And when you move Thuney, now Mike Caliendo has to be your starting guard. You've double moved it. It has not caught up with them yet, but Philadelphia could be different if Nolan Smith is coming off of that side and wanting to challenge him. Let's see how that goes. Thuney's a great player, but Danny, that continuity of the offensive line, they've made it work, but I really was not a big fan of two moves versus one.
Yeah, you do not want that type of shuffling taking place up front along those front five offensive linemen. I go back. I think this is the real liability that I'm concerned about most if you're worried about a Kansas City Chiefs victory. Remember, the last time that they lost in the Super Bowl was against the Tampa Bay Bucks in Tampa, and I know Tom Brady was on the other side of the ball, but do you remember where Patrick Mahomes was? Running for his life most of the game. And he still almost made incredible plays, which he's more than capable of doing. But with that line being shuffled around, I worry about some of the vulnerabilities. I do think it's a credit, too, to the guys that have been there. Guys like Creed Humphrey at the center position probably doesn't get enough love. That is the quarterback, the communicator of the offensive line. I think that's a huge part of why they've been able to get this far with somebody like that up front that's able to direct traffic against around guys that aren't used to playing the positions. Hey, we're working up to this guy. Here's where your pass pro is going to. Here's where we're sliding to. Like, just being able to communicate those assignments and being on the same page as number 15 behind you. I think Creed Humphrey deserves a ton of credit for getting him this far as well.
Let's go to the corner position because after L'Jarius Sneed departs KC, Trent McDuffie kind of steps into that role. And Danny, I'll start with you. Kind of lay out the differences between these two guys and if they skipped a beat at all.
I mean, they missed a beat early because you're putting in a young player, but this is what good organizations do. They recognize issues that could come up and they draft to address them. As the 21st pick in the first round, McDuffie's been really solid playing this role where now you feel really comfortable and you're really confident in Steve Spagnuolo is able to call anything he wants. I don't think he's worried about putting him on a corner, leaving him isolated whatsoever. So I think this is just a sign. And I know Howie Roseman on the other side gets so much credit, but this is a testament to the Chiefs being able to draft some depth and making sure that they kind of have guys lined up where if you lose a player like Sneed, you pop in another one like McDuffie and there's not much drop off.
Yeah, Dan, he's terrific, isn't he? And we thought he would be coming out of college, but we also saw where he played when he was able to go into the slot. And he and L'Jarius Sneed both could play the slot area very, very well. And I think their plan was to have McDuffie take over full time in the slot. But they weren't able to do that this year due to injuries and other various things. So guess what? He's out on the corner. He's terrific. He's Pro Bowl, All-Pro player. But Chamari Connor has to play the slot for them. And he's much more caught in between. Is he a safety? Is he a corner? And that's where the struggle has been for them all year long. I can't wait to see what Philadelphia does trying to challenge them there. Devontae Smith take his turn in there. A.J. Brown take his turn in there. Do some certain formations, and all of a sudden Dallas Goedert is the guy that's in the slot for you. That's where I expect them to challenge Kansas City. McDuffie, I'm not saying you don't challenge him, but at the same time, you expect him to play awfully well. I want to know if Chamari Connor is going to play really well in the slot if I'm Nick Sirianni and Kellen Moore of Philadelphia when I'm drawing up my ball plays for Sunday.
Charles, Danny, we appreciate it. Hang tight because we have more to come. We've looked at the Chiefs in Super Bowl 57 versus 59. And coming up on the other side, we're going to do the same, but with Philly. Back here on HQ Spotlight, the Eagles' revenge tour is underway. They rolled over the Washington Commanders to win the NFC Championship and punched their ticket to the Super Bowl. Welcome to the Super Bowl, Saquon and his family. We've seen this film before, though, because it's the 9th Super Bowl rematch in NFL history. Now, the winner of the first game is 6-2 the second time around. Now, the Eagles are going to try to flip that script because history, of course, is not on their side in terms of that specific stat. So here's more from Nick Sirianni on the rematch. Take a listen.
If you embrace adversity, it can shape you to who you are. And obviously that's been the case through Jalen and his career. But it is about embracing adversity. This game's not easy, and this game has its ups and downs. And that's how a football game, seasons have ups and downs. From year to year has ups and downs. Well, that's how a football game goes, right? And nobody in the NFL, I've said this a bunch, nobody in the NFL pitches a perfect game. That doesn't exist in the NFL. You're going to have bad plays. You're going to have good plays. And it's about being able to focus your mindset on the next one. And so, like I said again, this team's embraced adversity. I don't think, you never know, but, the things, even going back to the 2023 season, which we haven't talked a lot about since the beginning of the year, we're grateful for that. We're thankful for that. As bad as it sucked at the time, I know I'm grateful for that. I speak for myself. I'm grateful for that because it shaped us into who we are now, and why a big reason why we're back here sitting at this moment again. And so, embracing adversity is huge, and for your development as a person, as a player, as a coach.
All right, back here with Charles Davis and Danny Cannell, and Nick Sirianni kind of laid it out nicely for us. We're going to talk about the development and the differences with the Eagles since the last time that we saw them in the Super Bowl. And we have to start with the ground attack because, Charles, I'll start with you. That is the glaring, obvious difference here in Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, and look, this offensive line has been good for a long time now. Now, certain pieces have changed, but the basics have been there. The Philadelphia Eagles are going to build with an offensive line. They're going to be great at it. And you could make a case that more of their guys should have been All-Pro and Pro Bowl. But I think after a while, people are like, I can't have too many because it just looks bad. Well, guess what? You've got them. And Danny, as you know, Cam Jurgens is the lightweight of the group. What's he, about 315, 320, playing center? Mekhi Becton is a left tackle playing guard. He's a mammoth man. They create space. And all Saquon Barkley needs is a sliver. And once you get that, he'll take it from there. They found the guy. They had a good rushing attack the last time they played. Miles Sanders was there. But Saquon Barkley is truly elite and is on an incredible heater of a season.
Yeah, an MVP type season. I know he plays running back, and if he would have caught Eric Dickerson's record, maybe that would have made it more valid and he would have gotten more attention for it. But he has been that special. And, everyone's been happy for this, except for New York Giants fans or former players like myself, because he returns home. It's like it really breathed from some fresh life into him to be on a team that had a quarterback who didn't exploit you, where they couldn't load up the box, where you had some receivers on the outside that you couldn't load up the box, to have an offensive line like he's got up front. And you could just tell how much fun he was having, how much enthusiasm he was playing with, and how much he attacked this season, feeling like, all right, I've had a taste of what it's like not to win, and now he's starting to experience what it's like to do in his hometown, Philadelphia Eagles uniform. It has been one of the biggest additions of this entire offseason. You can make a case for Derrick Henry and what he did for the Ravens, but what Saquon Barkley has brought to the Eagles has been nothing short of phenomenal.
Yeah, I love the story that he shared.
Hey, Danny, I got to ask real quick. How has your sleep pattern been this entire season? Because that was the start of it all, the offseason hard knocks. When Mr. Mara told Joe Shane, well, all I know is I'm not going to sleep real well if he ends up in a Philadelphia Eagles uniform. And 2,000 plus yards later, there can't be much sleep going on at all.
He followed it up, Charles, with that's one of our fan favorites. And it's not even close. It's Saquon and then everybody else in the Giants, and they still let him go.
Yeah, so extra shade when the Empire State Building was lit up in Eagles colors after they punched their ticket to the Super Bowl there. Let's talk about defense, because Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis really headlining that defensive shift. And DK, Jalen Carter is for real when we're hearing people call him baby Chris Jones.
No doubt. He is phenomenal. And this, team, one of their weaknesses the last time around when they faced 2 years ago was the interior of that defensive line, where it was a little bit light. It is not light anymore. When you think of Jordan Davis, who was young on that team, just a rookie, now he's come into his own. When you pair them up in the middle together, Jalen Carter has been sensational. For him to drop into Howie Roseman's lap where he did in the draft, because there were some issues off the field with the car accident that took place at the University of Georgia, after his season there, was absolutely a godsend for this team. And now you've got two of the best paired up in the interior, allows so many guys like Nolan Smith to eat on the outside in the linebacker position and off the edges. It has been probably two of the best pairing interior defensive linemen that we've seen across the NFL, and a huge reason why they're here on the verge of a potential Super Bowl title.
And Danny, I like where you were headed, because you were expanding it beyond Jalen Carter dominating up front. And remember, he closed out the Rams game. A sack on third down, pressure on fourth down, Stafford's incomplete. They finished the ball game. He plays a lot of plays. And you remember Jordan Davis coming out of Georgia, Danny, that was one of the things people were concerned about. He didn't play that much. Would his stamina hold up? You don't have that worry with Jalen Carter at all. But what it has done, and you started talking about it, Nolan Smith is now starting to come into his own off the edge. That helps Josh Sweat on the other side off the edge. Before Nakobe Dean got hurt, he was having his best season as a pro. But how about all the way in the backfield? Let's get back to the secondary. Quinyon Mitchell in the first round, another guy that fell and stayed and was right there at 22, and the Eagles didn't have to make a move to get him. He's been sensational. And how about Cooper DeJean? Did not practice and play much in the preseason due to injury. Right after the open week, they inserted him into the lineup, and he's been extraordinary at the nickel position, because the talk prior to was, is he a safety? Is he a corner? Is he a nickel? The answer is yes. Wherever you want to put him, Cooper DeJean's going to be terrific. Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis and crew up front have allowed the rest of the team to flourish behind them.
Let me circle back to the top with Nick Sirianni, who has been a constant in Philly sports and the football team the last handful of years, but he has gone through so many coordinator changes. Let me just go through the timeline, guys, where you had Steichen and Gannon get head coaching jobs after that loss in Glendale, Arizona. Then Brian Johnson, Sean Desai / Matt Patricia gone after a disappointing season. Then in comes Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio. Did everybody get that? That's the changes that's been happening. And he might be gone too as well. See, I'll give you first word, because there's been so much change for a team that has been consistent here, yet a Super Bowl that's different than 2 years ago.
Yeah, so what does that point to? When you think about it, Tommy, Jacqueline, and Danny, we're talking about all these coordinators, but there's one constant. Despite the fact there's all this so-called turbulence and what did Nick Sirianni do today? He's head coach. He's still there. He's the one guy that's been there and how it's worked out. And look, Sean Desai didn't work out. Brian Johnson didn't work out, but neither one of them were controversial picks. In fact, they were both welcomed. They were praised. For whatever reason, it didn't work. But this year, Kellen Moore likely going to get the Saints job when it's all said and done. Vic Fangio, he found his sweet spot back in Philadelphia, and this team has responded. So you have to ask the question, Miami, how come you didn't respond to this guy? This guy knows what he's doing, right? Bottom line is Nick Sirianni. Okay, if it was a bump last year, they corrected it in a big way this year with the coordinator choices.
Huge way. And I was wondering if Sirianni would make it through the season if they fell short of even making the playoffs or an early exit from the playoffs, even with that Super Bowl appearance just a couple years ago. He's come under so much scrutiny. And then there's, early reports this season of dealing with some frays within the team, some fractions, and it did not look pretty, but he has remained steadfast and has not lost the commitment, lost the vision to bringing a Super Bowl trophy back to Philadelphia. And I do think it's a perfect pairing with Fangio, who's been in the NFL for his entire life. He's in his 60s. He's been around the game for 30 years. And then a younger mind in Kellen Moore. And I will say this, I think the thing that impresses me a lot with Kellen Moore is his ability to win different ways with different styles of systems. When he was in Dallas with Dak, they were throwing it almost too much, that he took some criticism for throwing the ball too much. Now he comes there and they have one of the most run-based attacks in the entire NFL. And I get that you have Saquon, like how hard is it to do that? But he is playing to the strengths of the players that he's been given. And so I think he deserves a ton of credit there. And I totally agree with you. As somebody who lives here in Miami, I guarantee there's a lot of Dolphins fans that are wondering the same thing about, hey, why didn't Fangio work for us? Maybe it was something else. And a lot of times it is personality driven. And like in any business, maybe there was a difference of personalities. But when you've got winning mindsets, sometimes you got to figure out how to make it work.
It also helps if you're one of the highest, if not highest paid defensive coordinators, too. So Fangio getting some good top dollar there to pay and pick that side of the ball. Charles, Danny, certainly appreciate it. Great stuff there on both the Chiefs and the Eagles. A reminder, CBS Sports HQ's at the Super Bowl. Kyle Long, Katie Mox, Jonathan Jones, and Brian McFadden. Check them out over on HQ.